Today, I'm going to show you how to create sun rays in Photoshop. Hey guys, and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace, and you can find me on Phlearn.com, where we make learning Photoshop and photography fun. And today's episode, we're going to be creating some sun rays from scratch in Photoshop. This is a super cool technique that you can do on any image that has a visible sun. We're going to start off by creating a bunch of little dots of light. I'm going to show you how to use the brush tool and scattering to make all these dots very quickly. Next, we're going to take all these little dots and apply a radial blur. It's going to turn the dots into rays of light. Add a blending mode and some layer effects, and you're going to be good to go. All right, guys, let's jump into Photoshop. So here's a perfect image that could use some light rays. Now, the reason why this is so nice is because we've got a great visible sun in the image. Not only that, but it's kind of coming through some trees. It's kind of begging for some light rays, and there aren't any in the image present, so we're going to be adding some. So really simple to do, actually. We're gonna create a new layer, and I'm gonna use my brush tool, B for the brush tool, and then I wanna sample a color, not like super white, but something like you can see here, right as the sun is like coming through the trees, we're getting this like nice, bright, like yellowy orange color, okay? So hold Alt or Option when you're in your brush tool to sample a color, and you can see I'm sampling this color right there, and this is going to be the color of our light rays. Okay. Now, in this case, what I want to do is I want to create individual little spots of light, and I want to create a lot of them. Now, with my brush tool, as of right now, this is what it looks like, okay? It's just like, it's a regular brush tool, right? So what we're going to do is I want to change this to be, instead of like a straight line, I want it to be a bunch of little dots. So we're going to go to Window and down to Brush to bring up our brush options. All right, so the first brush option we want to check here is Shape Dynamics. We're going to go ahead and turn that on. And I'm going to bring my size jitter all the way up. This is going to make some of these dots a little bit smaller and some of them larger. And we're going to bring our minimum diameter right on down. So it's going to make some of these really small. We don't want them to all be about the same size. There we go. Next, we're going to click on Scattering. Now, scattering is going to take what was like just a regular brush stroke and turn it into a bunch of little dots of light. So here in Scattering, I'm going to click where it says both axes. We're going to turn that on. And I'm going to take my scattering and bring that all the way up. And you can see in the little preview right down here what happens when I bring scattering up. There we go. It just kind of spreads these into a lot of different little rays of light. All right. Well, let's take a look at what this actually looks like when we paint on our image. So I'm on a new layer. We've already chosen our color here. And now I'm painting around our image, and we see all these little dots of light. This is so cool. Now, I've got all these little dots of light. They're kind of like close together. I want them to be a little bit farther apart. So we're going to click on our brush tip shape here, and I'm going to bring my spacing up a little bit. And this is just going to space those dots. You can see if you bring it down there, you got a lot of dots going to kind of come together. Bring your spacing up if you want these to be spaced farther apart. All right, there we go, looking good. Now you can make some of these dots a little bit larger if you want, and some of them smaller. Remember, this is going to be we're going to be applying a blur to this, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect right now. All right. And remember, each one of these dots is going to become a light ray. Now, what's so nice is because they're so scattered and so random, it is going to look like a very random pattern. It's not going to look necessarily like it's done in Photoshop, which is what we want, right? We want it to actually look real. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure to put a cluster of dots right here around the actual sun to make sure this is where I want the strongest effect to be. The rest of it, that can kind of taper off, but right here around the sun, that's where we want our strongest effect to be. All right, cool. So we've got our background layer, and now we've got a bunch of dots right above our background layer. Cool, we're ready to turn these into light rays. All right, guys, now it's time to turn all those little dots into light rays. And to do that, we're gonna use a radial blur. So let's go up here to our layer here. We've got our layer with all these little dots on it. We're gonna go to Filter, we're going to go down to Blur, and over here to Radial Blur. Now within Radial Blur, we've got a couple options. I can spin these little dots. Let's see what happens if I do that. We'll hit OK, and we'll spin them around the center there. All right, this is actually, there we go. Just to kind of see what's going on. We've got a bunch of like spinning. I'm going to create a black layer underneath this so we can see what we're doing here. All right. There we go. So that's what the spin effect looks like. It's cool, but it's not exactly what we want. So let's undo that a couple times. Now we're gonna go to Filter, Blur, we'll go down to a Radial Blur, and this time we're gonna click on Zoom. We want these to zoom out, and I wanna bring my amount way up so we get like a really far zoom with my, basically it's gonna turn these these little dots into light rays. So the next thing we wanna do is choose our blur center. You know, if you had the sun in the top right of your image, you would put it right about there. In this case, it's about the center. So I'm gonna choose right here around the center. All right, and let's hit OK. It's gonna take a second and then apply this blur and turn basically what was just a bunch of lights, little dots, into light rays, which is super cool. Now you can do this a couple of times. Let's say we want a little bit of variation. Like that one looked pretty cool. Let's create another little layer. Little layer. All layers are actually the same size, so I'm not quite sure why I said that. Make it cute. Oh, create another little layer. All right. Now, if we want to apply the same exact blur, it's really easy to do. All we have to do is hit Control or Command F, which is the same thing as going to Filter and then Radial Blur right there. Control or Command F. There we go. So I'm going to hit it here, and you can see this time I use smaller dots, so my light rays are going to be a little bit smaller. Okay, so we've got a couple of different options here. This one, you can see it's a little bit like these little dots are larger, and we have a little bit more broad light rays, and these are a little bit smaller. Okay, or you can turn them both on and combine them if you want, if that's what you want to do. Either way, it's totally cool. I actually kind of like them combined. All right, now with these light rays, you can see that the center, let's just create a black layer underneath that so I can kind of see where the center is right now. It's not exactly in the right place. You can see it was right about there. I need to move it. So both of these layers, I'm gonna hit Control or Command T. Let's just zoom out. And that's gonna transform these layers. And then I'm able to just transform my light rays. So you can see, like, you know, I could put it in the center there. I can stretch it out. I can put my light rays wherever I want them. Just make sure that the center of your light rays is coming from your light source. That's how it's gonna look realistic. If you have, if your light rays are like coming from right there, that's like, it's just not gonna look real ever. So make sure the center is right here where your actual light source is. All right, guys, we're almost done. We've done all the hard work already. All right, guys, so I like what's going on here. Now I'm gonna merge these two layers together and change the blend mode. So I've got both layers here, just making sure that I actually do want both of these. Maybe I'll bring the opacity of this one down just a little bit, make it more realistic. Let's shift click on those layers and hit Command E to merge those together. Okay, now we want to change our blending mode to make it a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to go from normal down here to screen. There we go. You can also try things like overlay. There we go. Or things like color dodge. There we go. So each of these, you know what? Actually, color dodge looks good. That's pretty cool. We can work on our opacity as well. All right. So I would recommend going through those because I thought screen was going to look better, but I kind of like what color dodge is doing there. Okay. Now, when you're on your layer, if you want to adjust the brightness of these light rays, it's super easy to do. Just hit Control or Command U. Now, this is going to bring up your hue saturation adjustment layer. Okay. So here with your hue saturation, I can bring my lightness up, and you can see there it's being affected on my image. Bring our lightness down. We can bring our saturation up. There we go. And I can even change the color. Like if I wanted, like more blue light rays, I could do that. In this case, it doesn't really make any sense. So we're just gonna bring our lightness up just a little bit. There we go. And we're looking good. All right, guys, and that's all there is to creating light rays in Photoshop. All right, guys, just follow these key steps. The first thing you want to do is make sure you're working on an image with a visible light source. It's not going to work if you've got light rays coming from like the ground. That's obviously not going to work. So in this case, we've got a sun visible in my image, and that's what we chose to use. Next, we went to our brush tool. Holding Alt or Option, I sampled a very light color from the sun itself. I would recommend a very bright yellow. From there, I went to Window and down to Brush, and turns things like scattering all the way up. That allows me to create a bunch of little particles, which we were then going to blur into light rays. Now for the blur. We want to go to filter, down to blur, and then over to radial blur. Make sure you're set on zoom and bring your percentage all the way up to 100. That's gonna turn those little dots of light into light rays. Now remember, you want all your light rays to be centered around a specific light source. So if you need to move them at all, just hit Control or Command T. This is going to allow you to transform that layer and move it into place. Next, it's time to change the blend mode of the layer. It's gonna help those light rays blend into the image a little bit better. In this case, I tried color dodge. If you wanna try like overlay or soft light, that's totally cool too. All right, guys, and that's all there is to it. Thank you so much for watching Phlearn.com, hanging out with me and learning some Photoshop. If you love Photoshop like I do, you'll probably want to click on your screen right now because there's a big subscribe button there, and we'll send you free Photoshop and photography episodes every single week. And if you have an idea for an episode, like, oh man, it was so cool, learn how to do some sun rays, I want to learn how to do blank, just leave it in a comment right down below. That's how we get our ideas for these episodes. I'd love to read your comments. Thanks so much, guys. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone. Woo! Champion, the master of light rays. Master of light rays, he's pulling the strings. Master of light rays, he does fancy things.